We're back on a fabulous morning on 103.9 Proud FM, and Hunter, Pierce Murray, George Smitherman. What a team. Do you think they could run this city? Goodbye, David Miller. Anyway, George, today actually we're not going to talk about George the politician. Maybe a little, but not too much, because we know that you're going to be our next mayor, and we're going to deal about that on a show later this season. But I want to know about George the man, George growing up. Where did you grow up?
Well, firstly, I want to say it's a pleasure to be here, and I want to thank you for your strong endorsement. I'm a citizen of Toronto. I was born in the city of York, grew up in Etobicoke, and I came out downtown.
A real Torontonian.
Well, so do you have siblings, brothers and sisters?
Yes, I'm the youngest of 4 kids, and then my parents divorced, and each of them ended up with stepkids. So when you bring it all together, there's 9. And I'm still the baby of the family.
Still the baby of the family. When did you sort of get the little bit of well, I'll rephrase that. When did you figure out that you were gay?
Well, I think that as I look back on it, there probably were some signals in my early teens and the like. But really, I would say that the period of time when I essentially came out was around the same time that I moved downtown, which was in 1987 when I was about 23. So a bit of a late bloomer.
Late bloomer. Well, I remember the first time I saw you was right on Church Street, actually, and in a photo shop or something right near Proud FM's station.
Sure. Well, right here in the Churwell Center, if it's still called that, with my business partner, Richard, from 1992 till 2001, I was an owner and occasional operator of a business that became known as Prince on Church. And it was, for me, a big part of my coming out to be at Church in Wellesley, to have a store at the top of the famous or infamous steps, depending on one's perspective, was a really important part of my life and becoming connected with this community.
Well, you brought up something, and I better bring this up for our younger audience. The steps were part of the Second Cup, and all the gay men, not all of them, but most of them, would come and sit on these steps and drink their coffee.
And cruise the street.
Cruise the street.
And occasionally make catcalls at people walking by, to the chagrin of those people walking by. A lot of our customers, especially on Saturdays when the weather was nice and the like, would have to fight through the throngs of onlookers to access our store.
Now, you still live in the area?
Yes. Well, I got married a couple of years ago. My husband, Christopher, and we had a home in Cabbagetown, which was just too much work for us. So we sold that and moved to a condo just at Church and Carleton. So the neighborhood is our neighborhood.
So you're really in the hood. Now, how did you get interested in politics?
Pierre Trudeau is the short answer to that question. As a young person in Etobicoke in the 1980 election, around when I turned 16, I was drawn to politics because of him, and the local Liberal Party was very, very inviting of my efforts. So really emerged with politics as a really, really big part of my life.
We're back on a fabulous morning with our special guest, George Smitherman. And George, I have to ask you, you've always been openly out in the political arena. Did you ever get any harassment, or did you ever get anybody crapping all over you because you were a faggot?
What could you say? He was gay?
That's very strong language. I think I'm actually one of those that has a story to tell which is almost to the contrary. In certain circumstances, I'm sure that progressive politicians have been willing to give me the opportunity to work alongside them as a reflection on their values. I'm sure there's been the odd comment here or there, but what I always said is that for those that might be inclined to be opposed to me, I'll always give them a better reason to comment on it rather than my sexual orientation. No matter where I go, Ontario is a vast place, and there's this perception that outside of the urban area, people aren't interested in hearing about, the gays or what have you. But, the fact of the matter is my experiences have been almost universally positive. What I know is that a lot of people like to use the greeting, "Thanks for coming out." So no matter it was a hospital administrator or a small town mayor, I'd walk into their building, they'd say, "Hey, thanks for coming out today." I'd say, "Oh, don't mention it. I came out a long time ago." So I think I've been really fortunate in that sense. And like I said before, it's been my strategy. People say, "When did you first come out?" But I find that I have to constantly come out because as much as I'm out there as an openly gay politician, not everybody's following the news. And so I'm identifying my orientation on a pretty consistent basis.
Good for you.
George, you've traveled the world.
Not really. I traveled Ontario, which is
well,
as big
no, but
as,
you did, weren't you away?
I have done a little bit.
You've done a little bit of traveling. Okay, so we'll just say you've traveled. How's that?
Okay.
Is there one outstanding moment in your life that stands out from any other?
I think it's a little bit hard to reduce life to one moment. I could think of many signature moments, but I think certainly having the privilege in a country like Canada, where a place where it kind of all came together for me was getting married. We did it in a setting with friends from a variety of and family from lots of different perspectives came together. We did it in a place that was breathtaking in its beauty in northern Ontario. We did it associated with the traditions of First Nations, Two-Spirited Nations wedding ceremony. And a man who had been far more than patient in waiting for me to accept the love that was on offer was still there and available for us to build a life together. So I think my wedding a couple of summers ago was really one of those that I would point at as a high watermark. And I think that the story that I told you before about Trudeau and his influence on me is something else, because the trajectory of my life so strongly influenced by the fact that as a 16-year-old kid, I walked into a campaign office and people that didn't know me treated me like an adult from the get-go and welcomed me into an organization that became kind of almost like a family. These are, I think, a couple of points that I would emphasize.
We're back on a fabulous morning. I'm Ann Hunter.
And I'm Pierce Murray. And he's George Smitherman. George, I remember seeing you work your ass off at the gym and run. And you used to run all the time, too. You've done a couple of marathons.
I've only done one marathon, but the great thing that happened to me this year is I ran 5K at the Scotiabank Waterfront Marathon, and some people in the media reported it as if I had run another marathon. So that was the greatest second marathon I ever did run.
That was an easy marathon anyway.
When you weigh as much as me in running circles, they call you a Clydesdale, which is a way of handicapping expectations about how long it takes you to run. So I think that what I learned about marathon running is that it's a good for the cadence of a long election campaign.
So do you like to snack? Is that why?
Yes. Well, my husband works for Lindt Chocolate, so
send him over.
I have a built-in excuse. But the sporting activity, which is my strongest motivation these days, is tennis. I've come to tennis a little bit later in my life. I played a bit as a kid, but that is the game for me, and I plan to get old playing it.
Playing tennis, good for you. I heard you were a snowmobiler too.
Yes, I have a bit of a need for speed. And I hope that Christopher's not listening, because he's a Sudbury boy and he doesn't really have that much appreciation for snowmobiling, but I do, and I manage to get at least one good snowmobile trip in every year, and certainly looking forward, hopefully, to run the Abitibi Canyon way up north this winter.
Well, good luck with that. We'll be right back on a fabulous morning on 103.9 Proud FM.
We're back with our special guest, George Smitherman.
Yes.
And it's been delightful having you, George.
Yeah, hearing about George the man.
We didn't touch on music, favorites, or,
And we didn't talk about politics, but we're going to talk about that soon.
Yeah,
George,
we will have
because George will be back. And we'd like to thank you out there for listening to us this morning. And if you have any ideas for any shows, drop me a line at Pierce, Pearse, at proudfm.com. And remember, God save the Queens.